Magandang araw po sa inyo lahat. Maraming salamat po muli, Pastor Wilbert, for this opportunity and privilege to minister to our brethren at TCTL Church and to my fellow workers at School of Church Builders. Actually, I'm thinking of a good introduction for us to appreciate our topic more. I hope this will do. I have a question. Okay. I would like you to think of something or someone very close to your heart, very precious, tao o bagay na malapit sa ating puso. What if God takes it away? Paano po kung kinuha or binawi ni Lord? How would you react or handle it? Pasensya na po sa hugot ng tanong ko. Some of you are aware of what I went through. We all have a share of our defining moments. Ako, I'm still actually grieving for the death of my mom and still recovering from a mild stroke because of a heart condition. So in this sermon, I have chosen a man who is like some of us, have experienced great pain and loss. And we will see how he reacted or handled such pain. And I have chosen, mga kapatid, the story of Job. The story of Job has revealed something to help me understand of what to do in the midst of pain, suffering, trials in life, and our economic or our present pandemic crisis. We will also seek to study the purpose of God in our suffering, in difficulties, and the ways to overcome them in our lives to make us victorious in our Christian walk. So as a background, please open with me your Bible in the book of Job. Actually, it's the oldest book. Tradition ascribes it to Moses as the first book written. So in chapter 1, it describes, as we look at the slide, okay, as to his identity, in verse 1, he was described by God as blameless, upright, and God-fearing, who shunned evil. Okay, so how about in verse 2, patungkol po sa kanyang net worth. He was a wealthy farmer, herdsman, and a landowner of a vast property. Okay, sa family naman, verses 2, 4, and 5, he had 10 children. And take note, he is a godly father. Sabi dito, his sons like to have party. And yet, Job is giving daily offering in behalf of the children kasi concerned siya sa kanilang spiritual well-being. And as to his possession, in verse 3, ang sabi dito, he owns 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys, and a large number of servants. So mga kapatid, he was really wealthy in his time. How about to his reputation? Sabi po dito, he was very popular. In verse 3, he was described actually as the greatest man among all the people of the East. So, mga kapatid, that's how the Bible described Job. However, despite of those blessings in his life, Job experienced deep sorrow and great pain in his life. So, except for his life and his spouse, in chapter 1, verse 13 to 18, Job lost everything. Actually, only 3 servants survived to give the report. So basahin po natin in the slide. One day when Job's son and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabaeans attacked and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one left or escaped to tell you. Verse 16, while he was still speaking, so mga kapatid, take note of the intensity of the pain. Another messenger came and said, The fire of God fell from the heavens and burnt up the sheep and the servants, and I am the only one who escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, mga kapatid, you see here that Job was not actually given the time to recover. He was not given the time to process. Yet another messenger came and said, "The Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties and swept down on your camels and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." Wow, mga kapatid, everything happened in one day. And take note of the gravity of the report. Ang sabi dito, while he was still speaking, another one comes. Verses 16, 17, and 18. Mga kapatid, according to the commentary, the announcement here is in the span of 5 to 10 minutes only. So, have you experienced that kind of pain? Sunod-sunod. Mga kapatid, patong-patong na problema. And finally, the worst of them all is in verse 18 to 19. Ang sabi dito, while he was still speaking, yet another messenger came and said, "Your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are dead, and I am the only one who escaped to tell you." Alam po ni Satan na ang pinakasakit na dagok sa buhay ay ang pagpamilya na po ang nadamay. All of his 10 children were killed. And aside from that, we all know that Job suffered painful sores, dreaded the skin disease, and also add to that pain, he has to endure the cross-examination and the ridicule of his 3 friends na hindi po alam ang kanilang pinagsasabi. And worst, to add insult to injury, mga kapatid, his very own wife, who is supposed to encourage him, challenge him to give up, to curse God, and die. Mga kapatid, how would you handle and react if you are in such situation? How would you react? Loss of everything. Everything happened without warning. You see, I cannot help but to link yung experience ni Job sa current pandemic situation natin. Probably for some, we'll see that Job's circumstances have similarities to us, which will help us identify with Job and with his suffering. I know many of us have lost their jobs and find themselves economically devastated, just like Job, na nawala lahat ng kanyang kayamanan in a short period of time. Broke din po siya. This COVID-19 has taken the lives of friends, of our loved ones. And there is actually much grieving going around. And many of those who are currently infected with COVID are suffering greatly. Mga kapatid, you know what I'm saying. Actually, the effect has become so real and very personal sa akin. I realize almost every day, I'm sending either prayer of healing or sympathy notes sa mga namatay kong kaibigan. Marami po akong napatay na kakilala at kaibigan because of this COVID. And mga kapatid, I don't believe many today could claim that they are suffering as much as Job did. Mas matindi pa rin ang nangyari kay Job. Sabi nga, kotang-kota na po siya sa kanyang paghihirap. Pero, minsan nakakatuwa din. Alam niyo kung bakit nakakatuwa ang COVID? Kasi, dati nanay mo lang ang nag-aalala sa'yo pag may lagnat ka. Ngayon, buong barangay na, pati munisipyo. O, di ba? Nakaka-touch. Walang natawa. Anyway, yung natawa, sige, post kayo, smiley naman. Okay. So, ano po yung dalawang reaksyon ang makikita natin from Job and from his wife? Okay, ang sabi dito, Job wept and grieved. Saan ito makikita? Verse 20. At this, Job got up and tore his robe and shaved his head. So ang ibig sabihin po nito, it's a sign of grieving and mourning. Mga kapatid, it's not a sin to mourn. It's not a sin to cry because crying is not a sign of unbelief. Sometimes we are so unkind. Okay, so wag po kayong maniniwala kay Gary V na ang sabi niya, wag ka nang umiyak. Hindi po totoo yun. Even Jesus wept, di ba? Yung namatay yung kanyang friend na si Lazarus. Yung Holy Spirit, nag-grieve, di ba? But in contrast, tingnan natin anong reaksyon ng asawa niya who has no genuine walk with God. Okay, ang sabi po dito sa verse 9, sabi ng asawa niya, are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die. Okay, mga kapatid, by the way, in fairness naman, habang ina-analyze ko to, it is easy to see yung asawa ni Job is doing wrong in this scene. Yet, her response from a purely human point of view was natural. Or shall we say normal. Tandaan po natin, she had lost her children too, along with her home and her wealth, and now she watched Job, her husband, suffer in pain. Okay, put yourself in her shoes. So, what will you feel? Pero mali pa rin ang kanyang ginawa. So, anong sagot ni Job sa kanya? In verse 10, sabi dito, are you talking like a foolish woman? Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? Some people, even Christians, are like that, mga kapatid. Become very disillusioned and become angry with God. Nakakalungkot kasi asawa pa po ito ni Job. Sabi niya, give up your faith. Why serve a God who does not bless you? Ako, I praise God because my wife is exactly her opposite nung nagkasakit ako. Praise God. And how did Job, the blameless and the upright child of God, react with that situation? And mga kapatid, how we as Christians should react? The answer is in verse 20 to 21. Then he fell to the ground in worship and said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, the Lord has taken away, may the name of the Lord be praised. And I asked myself, how come Job still worship God? How can a person, even in this moment of great distress, can still worship God? Mga kapatid, how can I worship God if I hear nothing but bad news in my health, in my business, or in my family? But you see, the reaction of Job is worship God. Mga kapatid, our conversation today is entitled, When the Righteous Suffer. When the righteous suffer. Actually, there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from the life of Job, but please allow me to share with you the lesson, the truth, or the principle that I have drawn for us to take home. Okay, itong take home natin. 1-point message only. Listen to this. Righteous people can suffer, but God is most honored when we remain faithful and loyal, even in the midst of suffering. I'll say it again. Righteous people can suffer, but God's name is most honored and glorified when we remain faithful and loyal, even in the midst of trials, suffering, or material deprivation. You see, it's easy for Job to worship when we are blessed, right? It's easy to worship when we are blessed. But for Job, worship is not only if you are blessed, but also in times of trials and problems. It's easy to praise God when things are okay. Even Satan recognizes that in Job's hedge of protection, di ba? Sabi nga dito, sabi ni Satan sa Job 1:10, have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has. You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flax and herbs are spread throughout the land. Mga kapatid, as if Satan is saying, kaya lang naman si Job sumasamba eh. Kaya lang naman siya naglilingkod sa iyo kasi pinagpapala mo eh. And mga kapatid, it's also interesting to note in Job chapter 2 that few of Job's friends actually come to witness his suffering. And they actually got this erroneous conclusion, no? Yung wrong theology drawn by his friends. Alam nyo ang theology ng mga friend niya? That suffering, because they are accusing Job of sin, suffering is always daw a consequence or result of sin. O yan yung accusation ng mga kapatid niya. But mga kapatid, Job suffered not because of his sin. Amen? Di ba? In fact, sabi dito, Job carries a remarkable resume. Di ba? In chapter 1, verses 2 to 3. Di ba? He was described as a man who was, sabi dito, what? Blameless. What else? Upright, feared God, shunned evil. Mga kapatid, even the righteous and godly people suffer. Yes. Not because of their sin, but sometimes because of their faithfulness to God. Job's suffering here was a direct result of his faithfulness to God. And Job is telling us, listen to this, even if you walked in the life of faith and obedience, you can still experience losses, suffering, problems, and mga kapatid, even COVID-19. Do you believe that? Being a good person does not exempt you from trouble. Kaya, do not be misled. Huwag po tayong padadaya. Sa mga katuruan, there are teachings that it is daw always God's will for believers to become healthy and wealthy or successful in all areas of life. That physical healing and financial prosperity is guaranteed when you become a Christian. This teaching that says that when you get sick, it's because you have sinned and you don't have enough faith. That disease or poverty in life of a Christian is either a sign of weak faith or unbelief. Mga kapatid, remember, it is Job's faith. It is his strong faith that placed him into a suffering. Di po ba? Beloved, to say and claim that God's promises all believers prosperity, health and wealth in return for faithful obedience is offensive. It's offensive to those faithful believers who lived in poverty and did not get healing because of physical sickness. Alam niyo ang tawag po dito, prosperity gospel. Health and wealth. Word of faith. Name it, claim it. Ito po ay imported teaching from the US, and this is a dangerous teaching and is simply unbiblical. Not only Job, but another example is Jesus himself, di ba? He suffered though he was sinless. Meron pong preacher na nagsabi that we can live the best life now. Mga kapatid, but for me, our best life is in heaven. Because our life here on earth could be full of suffering and pain. Yes, no one is immune to pain and suffering. You know, life is a series of problems. Every time you solve one, another one is waiting to take its place. And this is part of life because we live in this imperfect and sinful world. But in all of these tragic experiences of Job, why did he not take his life or just commit suicide? Why did he not give up? Why did he not curse God? But still maintain his integrity. And ito po yung dahilan why Satan challenged God again. Actually, second round, challenge na naman niya kasi talo siya sa first round. Because Satan claims na yung test ni Job has not been severed enough. Kulang pa yung paghihirap ni Job. So in chapter 2, verse 4, Ang sabi ng Satan dito, skin for skin, a man will give all he has for his own life, but stretch out your hand and strike the flesh and the bones of Job. Sabi ni Satan, sige, infect ko siya ng COVID. Mga kapatid, sabi dito, and he will surely curse you to your face. God said to Satan, very well, he is in your hands, but you must spare his life. What is it telling us, mga kapatid? Satan has limited power and cannot bring destruction to God's children unless it is by God's permission. Amen? So, we will see here, Satan inflicted Job with a terrible disease from head to foot. Okay, characterized, anong sabi dito? Pakitingin sa screen, pasingtabi po sa mga kumakain, boils, in chapter 2 verse 7, itching, 2 verse 8, drastic change of physical appearance, hindi na po siya kilala ng kanyang kaibigan sa itsura niya, worms, okay, corroding bones and gnawing pain, blackened skin, horrible condition that continued for months. Mga kapatid, mas matindi pa po ito sa COVID-19. But still, he did not curse God. He did not charge God with any wrongdoing. What made Job such an intense child of God? What made Job, mga kapatid, made such an intense Christian that in spite of this severe trial, tragedy and pain and suffering, he can still praise and worship God? And you know the answer. I believe, and one of the reasons why Job still worship God is this. Job has his good heart and mind. And it showed to us that nothing that we possess in this world is really ours. Nothing in this world is ours. Mga kapatid, for Job, God is sovereign and He is in control of everything that happens to his life. He believed that God has an exhaustive control of his situation and recognizes God's ownership of everything that he possesses, including his wealth and family. Kaya po sinabi po niya dito, anong sabi niya? Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. The Lord gave, siya nagbigay, siya din ang kumuha. Mga kapatid, do not be too attached with earthly possessions. And Job is saying, there's nothing in this world that I possess which is really mine. Alam po kasi ninyo, yung degree of our suffering sometimes depends on our attachment, di ba, to certain thing. If we treasure it very much or love certain things and very much attached to it and it gets lost, we suffer a lot and even feel, that this tremendous grief. Naalala ko po, I'm still grieving. I realized my grieving of my mom's death was so overwhelming because of my bonding and connection. Kasi ang nanay ko bago namatay sa amin po nakatira. And I admit, I'm still crying pag naaalala ko. But here we see Job still praising, still worshiping God, even if he lost all his possessions and children. Hindi po dahil hindi siya mahal ni Job, but because of his realization that those things were merely entrusted to him by God. Everything belongs to God. Amen? Psalm 24:1, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. Mga kapatid, pahiram lamang po ng Diyos sa atin lahat. Pahiram. Have you seen a baby born with a land titles? Nakakita na kayo ng pinanganak na bata, mayroon ng ORCR kasama sa panganganak? You do not own anything. Therefore, you cannot lose what you do not own. Diba? Kaya nga, it's actually coined in Tagalog, ang tawag po dito, ari-arian. Parang kunwari lang, 'di ba? Bahay-bahayan, hindi po totoo. Kasi hindi po atin eh. 'Di ba? And the reason why we get angry at God is because we think that God is getting something which belongs to us. Kaya mga kapatid, na-realize ko, ang nanay ko hindi naman nawala eh. Lumipat lang po siya sa magandang lugar. O yan po ang sabi ni Kuya Olan sa akin. Because death is simply a transition into eternal life. Naalala ko na nawalan po ako ng napakamahal na camera sa Baguio doon at talagang inis na inis ako. Pero yung perspective na dapat, sabi ko, Lord, hindi naman yun nawala eh. Lumipat lang sa ibang tao. Hindi naman nawala eh. Nandito pa rin yun sa mundo. Kaya minsan po tumitingin po ako sa aking mga anak sa gabi habang natutulog. Sabi ko, Lord, salamat po Lord. Pinahiram niyo po ang mga bagay nito, ang mga anak kong ito sa akin. Salamat, Panginoon. Kaya po na when I'm listening to testimonies, na instead of blaming God, yung mga namatayan ng anak, instead of blaming God, sabi nila, salamat Lord sa pagpapahiram mo sa aking anak for 12 years, 10 years, 20 years. Nakaka-bless po. Nung na-stroke po ako because of my stage 3 congestive heart failure, I realized, mga kapatid, that nothing in this life actually belongs to us. I would speak of my life, my profession, my family, my ministry, and I realized how easily I could lose it all in a second. Kaya totoo po ang sabi ni Job, naked I came, naked I will depart. The Lord gave, the Lord has taken away. That's the perspective. Yan ang magandang attitude. And we will see here, all Job's prosperity is gone in one afternoon. One day. What in the world is going here? And we have to look outside the outside world for us to see what's going on. So, yung writer po dito give us a glimpse of what's happening outside the world. Okay, let's read at verses 6 to 12. Ang sabi dito, one day, anong nangyayari? Anong dahilan kung bakit nangyayari ito kay Job? One day, the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. And the Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? Satan answered the Lord, from roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. Sabi ni Satan, does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a hedge around him in his household? You have blessed him, the work of your hands, so that his flocks and herb are spread throughout the land. But stretch out your hand and strike everything, and he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, very well then, everything he has is in your hand, but on the man himself do not lay a finger. Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. Mga kapatid, Job did not know the contest that was taking place in heaven. Hindi po niya alam that he was a subject of a contest between God and Satan. So, meron pong spiritual warfare na nangyayari in the heavenly realm. In the spirit world, totoo po yun. And you know what? This is the mystery of suffering. Mystery. Was it unfair for God to allow Job to suffer over what was basically an argument between God and Satan? As if God is setting up Job for trouble. Tingnan niyo po, it was God introducing Job to Satan, di ba? And a surface reading of the book of Job usually evokes a reaction such as, why God is making a bet with the devil? Bakit siya pinagpupustahan? To make matters worse, Job never find out why he was afflicted in the first place. Sabi nga ni Pastor Wilbert, wala siyang kamalay-malay sa nangyayari sa kanya. Mga kapatid, after all his suffering, Do you think Job kind of deserved an explanation? But he didn't get one. Meron po ako narinig na sermon that the answer as to why Christians suffer is in the story of Job. But you see here, you can find it here, mga kapatid. Job didn't even get the answer. No direct answer from God. But one thing that Job certainly knew is this: God was in charge and that he belonged to God. That was enough for Job, resting on God's sovereignty. Listen to this. If we don't get God's perspective, we can say that God is power tripping. Parang, di ba? Power tripping. But when you know what He knows and you see what God sees and see the bigger picture, it was always meant to bless Job because God is wiser than us. Kaya sabi po ni Job, 42 verse 2, then Job replied to the Lord, I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. Wala pong pwedeng pumigil at humadlang sa plano ng Diyos. Remember that God has a purpose in everything that happens in our lives, good or bad, probably according to our perspective. But for Job, he said, the purpose cannot be thwarted. Alam po ninyo, Job's life is one that prompt yung old age questions na, why do bad things happen to good people? Natanong nyo na yon? Why does God allow suffering to His faithful and godly children while the unrighteous, yung mga corrupt government official, prosper and continue to be rich and enjoy life? You know, I asked that question also. At marami po akong kilala, mga kapatid, na matapat at makadiyos na kapatiran na tinamaan ng COVID at namatay. Yung iba, pastor pa. May kilala kayo? Ako marami. Meron po kaming close family friend. We've been praying. They're being used by God in the ministry. They died of cancer. Dalawa, very close to us. God was showing Job that knowing the who is far more important than knowing why. And in verse 38, actually, God reveals to Job who he is. Who he is. Okay, and to summarize, in chapter 38, ang sabi po dito, not all questions can be answered. Not all questions can be answered. We may never know the purpose behind our suffering, but, mga kapatid, we can know God. Knowing God in the midst of suffering, knowing that God cares through suffering, and knowing that He allows it for a divine purpose. Because, listen to this, our God of glorious side is also the God of the mysterious side. Amen? Do you agree with that? If you agree, post amen. I remember our President Duterte, during the Yolanda tragedy, nag-comment po siya, sabi niya, God must have been somewhere else, or that He forgot that there is a planet called Earth. Imagine, we all know, close to 7,000 people died. And I would like to share with you what I read in FB. Somebody asked, sabi dito, where was God when Miles Monroe is a well-known evangelist and author sa nakakilala sa inyo, together with his wife and his associates who were killed in a plane crash to speak sa isang Bible evangelistic conference. Where was God nung nag-crash yung kanilang eroplano? Ang sabi po dito, God answered, the same place I sat, sa dati kong kinakaupuan. And God continued saying, the same place when John the Baptist, my servant, was beheaded, when Stephen, my servant, was stoned to death, when Paul, my servant, was murdered in Rome, the same place, my son, the same place I sat when my only son was brutally crucified, wounded and killed. Sabi dito, my son, I have not moved from my position. I'm still seated on my throne. I'm still in control. Sa New Testament, God revealed already the purpose of our suffering. Romans 8:28-29, we all know that. We know that that God causes everything to work together for good. Not all things will be good, but all things will work together for good for those who love God, to be conformed to the image of His Son. And Job wants to tell us that our trials are oftentimes tests to develop our faith. And as Job is looking for the answer in Job 23:10, sabi dito, but He knows the way that I take. When He has tested me, I will come forth as what? Gold. Beloved, we have many unhappy endings in this world because we live in a fallen world. And this is the reality of life. It's not new normal, it's normal. In fact, Job feared it to come. Kinatakutan niya na to. Sabi sa Job 3:25, what I feared has come upon me. What I dreaded has happened to me. Ang society po natin is imperfect, sinful. We live in a fallen world, and it's only in heaven everything will be done perfectly the way God intends. But you see, here comes the test of our commitment and relationship to our God. Test of our faith. And I ask myself, are we seeing God only as a giver? Seeing God as a healer and savior or blesser? Or are we seeing Him as a sovereign Lord and ruler of our lives? Then I ask myself, Tirso, why are you following Jesus? Is it possibly because I received Jesus out of convenience for me to be blessed, forgiven, and saved, and not really seeing the Lord as my sovereign Lord and ruler of my life? Then I realized, mga kapatid, that God is not in the business of seeing to it that those who follow Him will have a relaxed and enjoyable life here on earth. But God's concern is the honor of His name. Not merely seeing to it that all of us who follow Jesus will have a convenient and pleasant life. Yes, our OPM, okay. Ang ating lesson, remember? Righteous people can suffer, but God is most honored when we remain faithful and loyal, even in the midst of suffering. Mga kapatid, if I want you to remember just one lesson from this sermon, this is it. This is the lesson I want you to catch or take home. God's name is greatly honored when those who follow Him remain loyal and faithful even in the midst of trials and suffering. Because God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in Him in the midst of loss, not prosperity. Because God's concern is our growth into the perfection, into maturity of our character to make us more like Jesus. And now, Job has come to a deeper and more intimate knowledge and understanding of who God is. Kaya sinabi po niya sa Job, for niya, my ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. What is our challenge? What is our application? Job 13:15. Though He slay me, says Job, yet I will trust in Him. Ako'y magtitiwala hanggang kamatayan. Mga kapatid, Trust Him through your suffering. Meron pong kanta, and I love this song. Sabi dito, God is too wise to be mistaken. God is too good to be unkind. So when you don't understand, when you don't see His plan, when you can't trace His hand, trust His heart. Amen. Trust His heart. Accepting God's sovereignty is also mean trusting God. Realizing that He is in control and He can be trusted. When we trust, we don't need to understand. And when we trust God, we trust Him not just for the result, but also for the process. You know, one of the reasons why Job put his trust in God? Kasi sabi dito ni Job, He is righteous. Job 4:17, can a mortal be righteous than God? Because he believed God is righteous, and when we speak of God's righteousness, we are speaking about the fact that God will always do what is right. He does not commit a mistake. God's goodness is not based on your circumstances. He is always good even when things are not. Nothing in Job's life and in our life happens apart from God's knowledge and plan. He does not commit a mistake. Our Father knows best. Amen? He knows what He is doing. And I believe, mga kapatid, that in God's sovereign power, He allowed this pandemic to hit us for a purpose. For a purpose. Sabi nga ni Pastor Wilbert, nasabi niya dito, I like it, God sends periodic shaking to get our attention. And if we respond right, we become a better person. Very true. Ano pong psalmist David said? Ano pong sinabi ni David? He said, it was good for me to be afflicted so that I might learn your decrees. Why He allowed it? To learn important lessons of life. Mga gintong aral. Tinuro po ito ni Pastor Wilbert. Mga kapatid, have you heard of someone saying, I have learned so many lessons from times of ease and comfort. Marami kong natutunan sa kaginhawahan, sa kagandahan ng buhay. Mga kapatid, wala pa po akong narinig na nagsabi. Ang narinig ko po, marami kong natutunan sa mga pagsubok sa buhay. There's a saying that says, in school, you are taught a lesson, then given a test. But in life, you are given a test that teaches you a lesson. Again, our lesson, righteous people can suffer. But God is most honored when we remain faithful and loyal, even in the midst of suffering. But the question is, does it pay to remain loyal and faithful to God? Is it worth it to remain faithful? Mga kapatid, the greatest payback we can learn from the life of Job is when the Lord said to Job, sabi po niya, Job, because you continue to be faithful and loyal in your devotion and worship, I will not only return your possession, but I will give you much more than what you previously had. Kaya ang sabi sa Job 42:10, and the Lord restored his fortunes and gave him, how many? Twice as much as he had before. And after undergoing the suffering and trials, God intended to make a payback to the life of Job. Because he maintained integrity, he did not curse God, charge him with wrongdoing. Instead, he worshiped God. Kaya ang ganda po, sabi po dito sa Job 42, how did God make payback of his faithfulness to God? Okay, look at the slide, sabi dito, God made him prosperous again. Verse 10, God gave him twice as much as he had before. He received comfort and material blessings, silver and gold from brothers, sisters, and friends. God multiplied twice his wealth. Before, he had 7,000 sheep, now 14,000. 3,000 camels, now 6,000. 500 yokes of oxen, now 1,000. 500 donkeys, now 1,000. His servant, twice as he had before. And as to his family, God gave him again children, sons and daughters. And it says here in the Bible, it is more beautiful than he had before. Mga kapatid, God gave Job a longer life. In fact, he lived for 140 years. And that's why he saw his children until the fourth generation. He died an old man and full of years. Mga kapatid, listen to this. This payback narration is found in the last and final chapter of the book of Job. Last and final chapter, chapter 42. Ano pong sinasabi nito sa atin? God always writes the final chapter of our lives. Amen? Job 19:25, it says, I know that my Redeemer lives, and that at the end I will stand upon the earth, and after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. Mga kapatid, Job declared God as his Redeemer, and he knew that his suffering is part of God's redemptive plan. By redemption, Job is speaking about God as the one who will justify, as the one who will pay back of what we have lost in life. No matter how we had been abused, persecuted, or suffered in life, mga kapatid, those who trust in God's redemption will see God's making the payback. If not in this life, for sure in our second life in heaven. Mga kapatid, more than 3,000 years after the life of Job, God revealed His only Son Jesus as Redeemer of mankind. God promises to repay much more than what He exacts from our lives. And that new creation will contain no more fear. The new heavens and new earth will have no more anxiety, no more depression or loneliness, no more death, no more mourning, no more crying, no more pain, no more COVID-19, mga kapatid, because our Redeemer lives. While it can be a challenge at times to wait patiently for the world to come, we hold on by faith, trusting God will fulfill His promise to redeem, to make and keep everything right and normal again, forever. Mga kapatid, this pandemic is not permanent. Yes, this too shall pass. Matatapos at malalagpasan din po natin ito. As I end, I don't know your situation right now, but I have this strong conviction that some of us here have certain fears in life. We're so attached to certain things. For some, our job, our business is what gives us joy. And the Lord is asking, what if I take away your job, your business today? Just like Job, will you still worship me? Mga kapatid, we have our family, and they are the very reason and purpose of our living. A reason of our joy, and God is asking us this pointed question. What if I take it? Will you still remain faithful and loyal to me? Even if you're infected with COVID? Job's experiences tell us, righteous people can suffer, but God is most glorified. God is most honored when we remain faithful and loyal, even in the midst of suffering. I'll end with a story. Like Job, this incredible story of faith belongs to Horatio Spafford. That's his name. He places his trust in God during his life of prosperity, but also during calamities. A devout Christian committed in serving the Lord. He was a prominent Chicago lawyer and a realty investor whose business was thriving. He owned several properties throughout the city. He and his beloved wife had 4 beautiful daughters and 1 son. Life was more than good. It was blessed. But faith, no matter how great, does not spare us from suffering. Di po ba? Just as Horatio hit the pinnacle of his profession and financial success, things began to change. It began with a tragic loss or death of his only son to a scarlet fever. Not long thereafter, the Great Chicago Fire destroyed every real estate investment Horatio owned. So thinking a vacation would do his family some good, he sent his wife and 4 daughters to ship to England, planning to join them after he finished some business at home. However, while crossing the Atlantic Ocean, the ship was involved in a terrible collision and sank. More than 200 people lost their lives, including all 4 of Horatius' precious daughters. His wife Anna survived the tragedy, and upon arriving in England, he sent a telegram to Horatio, and that began, ang sabi po sa telegram, "Saved alone. What shall I do?" So Horatio immediately set sail for England para sundan ang asawa. At one point during his voyage, during the sail, the captain of the ship, aware of the tragedy that had struck the Spafford's family, asked or summoned Horatio to tell him that they were now passing over the spot where the shipwreck had occurred. As Horatio thought about his 4 daughters who died, words of comfort and hope filled his heart and mind. It was then that he put his pen to a paper and sinulat po, the timeless hymn, the timeless song was born, beginning with the words, "When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrow like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul." Mga kapatid, I requested my wife Hazel to sing this beautiful hymn for us. And let us be silent and reflect for a while as we allow the Holy Spirit to finish the message. God bless us all.
Were you blessed with the message today? If so, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell button below for updates. Thank you for watching and see you next streaming.